What do you think the teacher's gonna look like this year? Teacher, stop that screaming. Teacher, don't you see? Don't wanna be no uptown fool. Maybe I should go to hell, but I'm doing well. Teacher needs to see me after school. I think of all the education that I missed, but then my homework was never quite like this. Oh, got it bad, got it bad, got it bad. I'm not the teacher. I got it bad, so bad. I'm not the teacher. Hey, I heard you missed us. We're back. I brought my pencil. Give me something to write on. I heard about your lessons, but lessons are so cold. I didn't know about this school. Little girl from Cherry Lawn, how can you be so bold? How did you know the golden rule? I think of all the education that I missed, but then my homework was never quite like this. Oh, got it bad, got it bad, got it bad. I'm not the teacher. I've got it bad, so bad. I'm not the teacher. Oh man, I think the clock is slow. I don't feel dirty. Class dismissed. Ooh, yeah. I got it bad, got it bad, got it bad. I'm a teacher. Yes, I'm hot. Oh my God.
There was a point in time over the last few years where our attrition, our turnover rate for security staff was 60%.
If I want to pretend I'm Joe Doe and take your image, your face, your video, your voice, and I want to replicate that, I want to be able to authenticate that and say, hey, this isn't Joe speaking to me. There's got to be something off there.
Everyone has a part in the security and safety of all of our guests and employees. And it doesn't stop just if security is in your title.
You guys communicate and have synergy with security and surveillance and cyber and even marketing and player development. And for so long, Joe, those departments were sideload departments.
I'm going to pull your heart out of your chest and shove it down your throat. Smoke them and then hit them over the head with it. Whatever you have to do. You have to have that kind of mentality.
If there's a way out, get the
Get
fuck
out.
out. You know,
Yep. If people paid attention more, there'd be less victims who probably wouldn't have been a victim if they would have been eyes up.
if you want to learn how to truly protect yourself and how to secure yourself, you should learn from someone who does it for a living or someone who has
Correct.
gotten away with it.
You'd be surprised how well you will do if you just fight for your life.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to SVIP Live. My name is Taylor May. I'm the founder of SVIP Security VIP, if you guys are not familiar with the company. I'm excited today because I'm speaking with a new friend on SVIP Live. Again, this is a series where I feature live interviews with end users in the security industry. And this gentleman, him and I, honestly, are speaking face to face on a call for the very first time. I actually reached out to this guy over LinkedIn, and he was gracious enough to say yes to a live interview on SVIP. But his name is Adam Smith. He's Director of Security Ops for UC Health in Colorado. And Adam, my friend, welcome to SVIP.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Excited to have you. And I want to just remind my listeners, everyone that's tuning in on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever you are in the world, drop your comments for the next 60 minutes because I'm going to be taking your comments and your questions to ask Adam. Now, obviously, if they're out of the blue comments and out of the blue questions, I'm not going to hit Adam with the questions. But if you do have questions, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to pick questions that are priority to Adam. And obviously, if you are a subscriber of SVIP, those questions are going to get asked first. But please drop a question if you have questions. I do want to give a shout out real quickly to my sponsor of this interview, a company called Swear. Go look them up. There's a QR code here on the screen. You can screen on your phone and see exactly what Swear is about. And if you're not a subscriber yet of SVIP, there's a nice QR code up there on the screen as well. But we're going to get right down to it. And Adam, I'm going to introduce your background real quick, man, and then we're going to just kind of dive into some Q&A, if that sounds good, brother.
Sounds great.
All right, my friend. So let me pull up Adam's background real quick. I think it's, Adam, I'll be honest with you, man. I have a lot of friends and user friends in casinos, retail, education, but hospital-wise, healthcare-wise, I probably have like 2 or 3, brother. I don't have a lot of healthcare friends, so I'm hoping you'll be a friend of mine, just I'll be as an ally to yours. But I do want to introduce your background real quick because it is special, it is unique. And so for my listeners, again, this is Adam Smith, Director of Security Operations for UC Health. He serves for UC Health. It's a nationally recognized nonprofit healthcare system comprised of 14 Colorado hospitals with over 2,000 inpatient beds and more than 200 clinics in Colorado, southern Wyoming, and western Nebraska. In Adam's role, he works with both contractors and hospital-based security staff across the system to promote the safety of patients, visitors, staff, and providers. He's responsible for security operations, security assessments, policy review, and creation, as well as developing and deploying educational sessions for UC Health staff. I love that part. I'm a big continuous learner myself. As we go on, prior to UC Health, Adam was employed with SMM Health for over 11 years. He was responsible for all security needs of SSM's 7 Wisconsin-based hospitals and 81 clinics. He also collaborated with counterparts to enact security changes at locations in 4 states and created use of force policies, physical security planning, and training requirements. Previously, he worked as a manager for security company G4S. We all know the lovely name G4S, which got acquired in the industry. Mr. Adam Smith holds a master's degree in criminal justice administration from the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, and he is certified through the American Society of Industrial Security, ASIS, as a certified protection professional, and through the International Association of Hospital Safety and Security as a certified healthcare protection administrator. Adam, my friend, that's a mouthful for an introduction, brother. But is there anything, man, that I just missed or overstepped that you want to bring up?
No, I think that's it. It's always awkward, talking about yourself with your history, right? But I kind of a one-trick pony in my industry, right? This is kind of where I meant to be. It's where I've fallen into. So growing into the role.
Well, I gotta ask you, man. Since you went to Wisconsin, are you born in Wisconsin, by the way, or are you born in Colorado?
I was. Cheesehead, born and raised. So
I would imagine you're a Packers fan. I would imagine.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you probably don't like where I'm from. I'm from Dallas, so you can imagine who I root for.
Uh,
But we suck.
it's
You
not
know.
Illinois. I mean, hey, it's
Yeah,
not Chicago. It's not Minnesota. We're good.
yeah. We can be friends then, right?
Hey.
Oh man. So Adam, again, hospital wise, healthcare wise, man, I'm sure you got a lot of challenges you have to go through. And I like to pivot to this because when I speak with my casino friends, it's a 24/7 operation, and hospitals are also 24/7 operation. So maybe walk me through and walk our listeners through kind of the day-to-day operations of your position, kind of what you're focused on, and maybe some challenges this year that are new or maybe evolving for 2025.
Yeah, and what I face every day is nothing different in healthcare. It's pretty universal across the nation as a workplace violence epidemic, right? Like we see all the things online for stewardesses and people on the airlines getting assaulted, but that's a day in and day out problem in healthcare where we face that nonstop. Our emergency department nurses are really under fire every day. They're serving people from all walks of life, right? People from off the streets, people from higher social economic, low economic, right? Everybody, it's a melting pot of problems at the hospital. So if you think of our patients, they're not always in the right mind. Some are having, mental health issues. Some are having drug addiction issues. And that's just the epidemic we deal with on a daily basis. So a little bit different casinos, like they have a different risk posture that they're looking at from a 10,000 foot view. Ours is how do you serve a public that you have to provide care for, yet keep your staff safe, right? The EMTALA Act, Emergency Treatment Act, where we can't just turn people away from emergency rooms, even though we're getting assaulted by them, right? We still have to provide that care. And our nurses are on the front line doing that. I mean, they have a passion and a drive to provide that healing care to people, right? So that's the biggest thing we face overall. My day to day is how do I keep my staff safe? How do I enact policies and procedures, align it with my business initiatives, right? Our core vision and values. How do we reflect that in our day-to-day security operations? As you can imagine, security is not the driving force for healthcare. We have to assimilate into their business model. So how do we take care of the mission of improving lives and incorporate that into security, right? How do we show up every day in a healthcare organization when typically people see you as a rule enforcer, right? Keeping people safe, but yet allowing access and getting that healing care to your patients and your staff.
You know what, Adam, is interesting. I've got a baby on baby number 2 on the way next Friday. It's a son. I
Congratulations.
have a Thank you. I've got a daughter, almost 2 years old, so I'm great. I got a son now to carry the name because I'm the last May in my family. I gotta carry that name on. But God forbid, man, like going to the hospital next Friday, we have a scheduled C-section. God forbid that anything happen while we're at that hospital, right? And I think the biggest frustration or the biggest concern anyone in today's environment is, you mentioned it, mental health is a big thing, not just in healthcare, but obviously schools. These kids are going through mental health. But God forbid an active shooter situation happen when we're there to deliver a child or welcome a child. God forbid, someone is suicidal or brings a weapon to the hospital. So maybe walk me through kind of like the experience. And you mentioned like nurses and obviously doctors, because I don't know if you watched the intro before we went live, Joe Doe, the VP of Corporate Security for MGM, talked about security as a shared responsibility. And, he's right. Just because you're the head of security doesn't mean someone else can't see something, say something, voice something if they see something of concern. So maybe walk me through kind of that experience for both staff, but also, people like myself who are having, expecting, kids on the way, and to make that safe and secure environment at the hospital.
Yeah, that's always the juggle. We try to promote a culture of security where everybody has a duty to report what they see, right? So, as my boss says every day, we have maybe 4,000 cameras throughout our organization, give or take, right? Whatever. But we have 34,000 employees that have analytic cameras attached to the ring every day, right? So how do we get them to recognize suspicious activity, report suspicious activity? If they see something that's concerning, report it. So we try to instill that into our training of our security awareness. Everybody has a duty to report. Like if you see something, get a hold of our security, the old adage, see something, say something. We do use that. We do quote that. And you reference active threat and active shooter. That's on everybody's mind, right? We saw the UPMC shooting. We saw all these campus shootings. Everybody goes to that. And then so our job is really to educate the facts around it. So in healthcare, you bring in your lovely wife and having a child, and how do we protect you? Well, one, we have security around our most at-risk units, right? Our staff are going to educate you on the security protocols that you're going to face with your infant, your newborn. But we also educate our staff around the true metrics around shootings in healthcare, which we have a targeted violence event, right? This isn't random acts. We're not a big venue. We're not a concert. We're not some of these publicly accessed events where the majority of shootings happens, but they're random. We do have an akin to school shootings where it's typically a former employee, or it's a patient or a visitor or someone who felt wrong or aggrieved by our organization. So we look at the targeted threat assessments that we do, and that's our approach to kind of keep everybody safe. So we calm the masses and say, it's not the person walking into the hospital with a gun just randomly wanting to shoot people. It's the person who's saying, hey, you're at fault for this. You caused this hardship in my life. And we really delve into a threat assessment process and do a kind of a overall approach, a holistic approach to that threat, to manage it from cradle to grave, right, until it's done and over with. And if it's an ongoing threat, it might take years. We all know that. We're in the security industry. We just kind of manage that and stay on board with it and keep everybody safe that way. But you're absolutely right. It's all the employees digging in to take that culture, staying out of a problem, right? I don't know how many times you see a person arguing with someone in a lobby, and then staff walk right next to it within 2 feet. And they're like, oh, wait, what's going on? And they suddenly realize that there's some escalated people, and they just put themselves into danger's way, right? So how do you get people to pay more attention to their surroundings? Stop that habit of doing your cell phone blindness, where you're looking at your cell phones and not paying attention to your surroundings. I mean, it's a nonstop education program, and anyone who's in the industry with publicly access spaces knows that educating once isn't enough. It's got to be in their face over and over and over again, and making it real and understandable to them, to make sure that they're taking initiative to keep their own workspace safe. And at the end of the day, even in an extreme event like an active shooter, you have a duty to keep yourself safe. There's not a magic button where all of a sudden bubble wrap surrounds you and ballistic walls drop down. Like, you have to know how to respond in that moment. And it's really our job as security leaders to make sure everybody understands their role in these situations, these emergencies. So frequent drills, frequent educations, touch points, in-person educations, our lovely U-Learn system, or our LMS systems that everybody, the learning management systems that we know everybody wants to get through as fast as possible. Having that comprehensive approach and that frequent communication, you got to get that word out there.
Well, that's my thing I bring up a lot, Adam, is complacency in this industry sometimes, where it takes an active shooter event or a horrible, tragic, situation to happen in order for things to change, in order for shit to change, whether it's technology, or it's procedure, whether it's continuous education. So I guess for your employees, Joe hit on retention a lot and attrition at MGM. He actually was able to reduce his attrition rate because he had a lot of people leaving, MGM, because of, they didn't know what to expect. They didn't know this was a job for them. So I guess when it comes to like your employees that are on your team, but as well as like the professionals, medical professionals, doctors, nurses, how are you keeping like them to continue to show up and make sure it is a safe learning experience? Because I'm sure you probably have attrition challenges. Everyone has attrition challenges to keep employees, but number one, retain employees. So how are you dealing with that kind of battle right now in the healthcare sector?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. I mean, nursing shortages is the thing. They've been experiencing since COVID. It's been a challenge to recruit nurses. They see that high level of violence that occurs in the industry. It's not always an appealing statistic to look at, right? And you tend to get the people who are really driven to make a difference in people's lives. But we do have an impact directly with security on turnover and attrition. It's a hard measure to quantify, because you can't show that what you've done really correlates to the attrition or lack thereof. But it's the education, empowering them to understand what's going on, empowering them to have a voice in the security program, starting from the day they're hired, having your security message and the new employee orientation, carrying that throughout. We have workplace violence committees that meet and discuss, the issue of workplace violence and follow up with people who are victims of violence, right? Like, it happens. No matter how hard you try, you're never going to eliminate all the risk to your organization. So a lot of times it's a follow through and follow up with those individuals that makes a difference and keeps them engaged and keep them wanting to work. They're like, my organization supported me through this. They cared. They recognized I saw change. I was told about what's happening. They touched base with me to see what my welfare was. They gave me a lot of resources. They gave me the time I needed to heal. They told me what they were doing to fix the issue, right? Like, there's a lot of things that you can do that even after the fact, to make someone feel supported and safe in an organization. And that's really what we're trying to do. Here's the lessons we learned from this issue. We have continuous active action, after action reports. We have continued follow-up. We have root cause analysis meetings on workplace violence events. We're always looking at empowering and making better our organization, right? So Not just, hey, this is where we screwed up, shame on you, we're holding you accountable, but how do we come together as an organization to grow and learn from what happened, and make everybody safe when they come into our facility.
Yeah, I think it's all about experience and value, right? People want to be heard, they want to be important. And my little sister's a nurse in Houston, and she just graduated from college, and now she's in the heat of being a nurse, probably working the graveyard shifts, and she's gonna have some situations and some nights that are not going to be normal nights. And I think that's one thing about the hospital industry, at least from from the outside in, is you never know what you're going to expect any given day. Same thing in casinos, you have different walks of life walking into a casino as you do in a hospital. But you mentioned 3,000 cameras, Adam. Is that correct at the hospital?
Over that, we have well over that. I don't know the exact number, but we have over that throughout the system. Obviously, there's 14 hospitals. There's a ton of technology we have deployed, and it's part of the overall process, right? You talk about what we do to keep nurses safe. It's an integrated approach. It's not just we're throwing up card access. It's card access cameras, panic systems, threat assessments, metal detectors in emergency departments where it makes sense, right? You doing that reasoned security approach in a responsible way, right? And I think we all know the most security with the least impact is what we go for. And so we have a pretty comprehensive approach to everything.
Well, the question I was alluding to is, a lot of questions I get all the time when I do these live interviews, like, hey, Taylor, what is Adam using for his cameras? Like, if he's got 3,000 plus cameras, who's the manufacturer, or who's the access control player, or who's the VMS player? What technology he's using? And you don't have to say any of that, Adam, but I do imagine some of the people that tuned in, they're like, oh, I want to sell Adam my LPR, my facial recognition, my weapon detection. So I mean, I will ask you this, Adam. Any general technology, man, or product that you're like, what, we standardize this solution for all of our hospitals because again, to your point, it's unified, it's integrated, everyone's used to it. Is there any kind of particular solution or product you're already using that's you kind of unified throughout the healthcare hospital?
I always am hesitant to ask that because it sounds like I'm endorsing it from a UCL standpoint, right? And I try to avoid that because that can get me in trouble with my job, right? Like, if you're speaking on UC Health, you're endorsing this product, and we try to avoid that with our culture. I personally, in my own opinion, I have worked with a number of vendors throughout my time, and there's a couple camera systems I'm really impressed with. I like the Vigilon system. I like the access control systems. I think those are some of the best cameras on the market, in my own personal opinion. Nothing to do with my job. Access control. Everybody's striving to be better. There's Secure, a software house that has such a robust platform, can do a lot of different things. I think that the other ones, S2 with Linnell has made a lot of progress. RS2, the Mercury board systems, they're really great because if you need to replace them, say a feature fell off you didn't like and you need to replace your access control system, you're just flashing your Mercury boards and moving on to the next platform, right? So I think there's a lot of technology out there and a lot that you can't go wrong with. You got to find what works best for you. I mean, I look at casinos, they have a ton of technology out there, but what works best for them may not work best for us. And understanding limitations of the technology you're using, everyone's going to sell you this great analytic tool, right? And that's the hot thing. AI is awesome and look at all the stuff they can do, but you really have to do your homework on what the limitations are. It's not the magic pill yet. I think eventually we're going to get there. Some platforms promise something but don't deliver on it. So just do your research on it. Everyone's job as a salesperson is to get you to spend that paycheck, but there are some really good companies and there's some other ones that you got to be cautious of. So just do your homework and your research on it.
So what Adam is saying, guys and girls, is you needed to subscribe to SVIP because we do exactly that. We exploit technologies. No, we don't exploit technologies, but we do write the truth around technologies and products and what's working. And honestly, we get a lot of our insights from guys like Adam, guys and girls that are end users in the industry. I think that's the best practical advice that when it comes to the solution or product is how are you using it? What's the effect? What's the pros and cons? Because you're right, man. You go to these shows, ISC West, GSX. I know some big hospital shows, but some of those vendors and those reps, and I was guilty of this too early on in my career. Is we're gonna promise you the world and above, and say, hey Adam, it's 99% accurate, dude. Deploy it tomorrow. You're gonna see so much success with it. And what do? You deploy the analytic, and it's 52% accurate, right? Or whatever have you. But you know what's funny, Adam? And I want to ask you this question, man, because when I started SVIP back in 2020, right when COVID happened, by the way, there was a lot of technology, man, that came out with COVID that was really bullshit, in my opinion. Fluff technology. One of those technologies, man, they called it was fever detection. So if you have, because one of the symptoms of COVID was an elevated temperature. Well, I'm in Texas, man, and when it's 102 degrees outside in Dallas, everyone's got an elevated temperature. So you can't tell me that a fever detection camera or scanner is going to say that I'm, asymptomatic or whatever symptom of COVID. So did you entertain any of those kind of like fever detection cameras or contact
We
tracing solutions or anything like
we
that?
had the BS detector like you're talking about, right? So I wasn't with UC Health at the time. I was back in Wisconsin working with SSM Health. A lot of people approached with that technology like, oh, we can get rid of all the screeners that you have at your entryways. And I know, you speak at casinos. I know casinos have that. I went to Vegas in the height of 2020, July 2020, right, for the 4th of July, and they had those heat sensors. And to your point, they're so inaccurate because, if I have the air conditioning on in my car, I'm too cold. If I come from
Exactly.
outside, then the heat is elevating my temperature to an unsafe condition, right? So we never left the thermometers. We went with the contactless thermometer, just the touch thermometers. Then we had the guns that were contactless, to avoid COVID. And those had some error ranges on them. And we had to have that exact conversation. If someone flags high, instead of like freaking out and running into COVID mode, have them sit in the vestibule for a few minutes, right? So that's a great
Right.
example of how technology was sold that we can solve your issue and we're going to get this. And oh, look, we have facial recognition that will recognize if you're wearing a mask or not. Is that the best use of my resources and my time is getting 100 alerts when someone has a mask pulled down or someone walking in without it? So it just goes back to vetting what you really want from a technology. I think the other one that's a hot topic is metal detection. We see all the metal detectors out, and there's a time and a place for metal detectors. I am not against them. We use them in emergency departments, but recognizing the right deployment of them. Right? Is that what you need? Are you giving into hysteria of the shootings? Is it an actual application for you? How many entries do you have into your facility? Right? We have. I can count of in one campus alone, we probably have 30 to 40 entrances. They're not all unlocked, but those are all entry points you got to worry about. So I put metal detectors in that too. Is that going to be effective in stopping what we want? So you really got to look and kind of, as you said, look through the BS and have that detector on like, how many false alarms am I going to get for this? And when does it become a nuisance, right? It's kind of like that great delayed egress door that we have that we all love so much that staff hate so much they prop it open and are like, okay, that's not serving the function we wanted because we thought it was a great technology, but practical application didn't really fit in there.
Well, what's a question, Adam, that I tell all my end user friends when they go visit a trade show or they get a demo from a manufacturer? I said the first question that you as an end user should ask the vendor or the manufacturer demoing the product is, "Hey, manufacturer, where do you suck? What is the biggest flaw or the weak point?" Now, you don't have to say it so boldly like I do, and I know I'm very blunt, but hey, man, if you ask it up front to a manufacturer, the manufacturer's either going to tell you the truth and say, "You know what, Adam, we're not strong in this area. We can't do this," or what are they going to do? They're going to fluff. They're going to be at BS and say, "You know what, we don't really have weak points," or they're going to say, "You know what, let me think about that. I don't know if I have a weak point." But a lot of times, man, when you ask manufacturers that question, they either freeze or they give you the truth, and so I like to encourage that to you the next time you get a product pitch. Is you should ask that question up front, because if you do get a genuine answer and say, hey, and they say, "Hey, Adam, we're not strong in this area," what does that do for you? It builds rapport, it builds your trust with that manufacturer. Then you can actually have an open dialogue, right? An open conversation.
Absolutely. I think it's a great call out because I tell you, the people who are successful in getting my business are those who are honest, right? And when
Yeah.
you challenge them on something and say, so you're saying this, but I really know how this works. And what about this? And I'm like, yeah, that's true, right? That honesty goes a long way. I'd rather buy a B product from someone who's honest with me than something that's supposed to be an A plus product from someone I can't trust, right? I carry that over into as I look at vendors that want to provide security services, right? Can I come to you with a problem and know I'm getting an honest answer, or do I feel like I'm getting a corporate talk to, or hey, I'm toting the corporate line and I'm just going to tell you what you want to hear, right? You quickly filter out that BS and find the people that you can relate to.
Now watch, all these manufacturers are going to do shit on me now for asking that question.
The hate mail.
Yeah, I do. Before I ask you this next question, Adam, again, I want to remind my listeners to drop a question if you want me to ask Adam. Again, Adam is the Director of Security Operations for UC Health in Colorado. And Adam, I don't know if you know this, man. So for so long, a lot of end users came to me and said, "Hey, Taylor, what's new? Like, what's happening in the industry?" Because you're right, AI is still hot. It's a big buzzword. Sometimes it's overinflated on certain things. But for me personally, Adam, I haven't really seen a lot of cool analytics or things come out until I saw this company, Swear, who is my sponsor on this. I'm not sure if you deal with this on your side, man, but deep fakes are a big thing happening in the security industry. We talk about cybersecurity and we talk about physical security now converging, but deep fakes, when people are impersonating your voice, your image, your likeness, your audio, whatever it may be. So if I was trying to pretend I'm Adam Smith to gain access to proprietary information at the hospital, what technology can disprove that or authenticate that. And that's actually what Swear does. They actually help with deepfake technology. So from your perspective, man, walk me through any kind of that synergy you may have maybe with IT or cyber. Are you dealing with those folks? You communicate with those folks? Because I've said this multiple times. A lot of people are siloed. Physical and cyber don't really talk to each other, but those cameras are on a network. The VMS is on a network. The access control on a network. So any kind of synergy there that you want to kind of speak about?
Yeah, I think you're hitting the hot topic with security. So I'm part of the CSO Center with ASIS, and
Love it.
that's always a talk, is the synergy between the two. And us old dinosaur physical security guys are always hesitant with this question, right? Because a lot of us think we're not smart enough to get into the IT realm. But we are two separate tracks, definitely in healthcare. But I have the cybersecurity leader's name and contact. We talk to each other frequently. I actually just asked him to do a symposium for security that's coming to Colorado. I said, hey, are you interested in this? Someone's reaching out for a cyber aspect. So we support each other. We talk to each other. I think in some organizations, there's a lot of bleed over that it's good. With healthcare, I think there's so much going on in the cyber realm. I mean, they're always at risk, and there's so much going on in the physical security realm, but I think there has to be a good connection there. But we don't have any kind of integrations. I mean, we talk about the needs for our cameras. We have kind of a hybrid function with technology where we have security technology people who run our maintenance and our upkeep of our cameras and our access control, and they're the troubleshoot people, and they coordinate very closely with IT. So I think there's kind of synergies in that way with they've been given admin rights to the computer to be able to install the software and troubleshoot things. So they have limited function with that, and they work closely with IT. So if we have a network switch go down, they're immediately on the phone with each other. They have a relationship with each other, and they're troubleshooting in real time versus, me as a director trying to call an IT guy who's never met me and never worked with me before saying, yeah, who are you? All right, get out of here. I got 100 other people who want this stuff fixed. So we kind of have those kind of synergies going on, but we are still two separate tracks. And again, the vast enormity of healthcare, if you look at some of our vulnerability assessments, IT security is top of the concern nowadays, right? So we're always looking at all the preventative measures that we need to take to keep our network safe. So it's kind of a good thing to have people that are solely focused on that, where we get to take care of the people and the physical security of people.
Well, that's why I bring it up, because I mean, everything is interconnected anyway half the time, and the odds of a cybersecurity attack happening versus an odd of an active shooter happening is not even close. I think you're dealing with someone that's trying to break into the hospital for financial records or medical records, or in the casino environment, it's about stealing and scamming a bunch of money, which happened to MGM, which I brought up on the call to Joe. It's about the scam there. So it happens, right? And it's more frequent. And I think that's the tough thing about the cyber side, is you don't know really exactly who you're dealing with half the time, because you can't pull up a camera, right? You can't see a profile shot. So that's my biggest concern too, Adam, as a father to a 2-year-old, and she's not in school yet. But when she gets to school, to a point where these hackers now, man, are trying to impersonate parents to these kids, and so what is little Jimmy gonna do, or little Laura gonna do when they think mom and dad is speaking to them? So there's technologies out there now that are helping with with the impersonations of deepfake technology. And so again, I don't get paid by the sponsor or anything. I just want to promote Swear because it's a great company. But Adam, I want to talk about this next question, man. How are you working with like local law enforcement and maybe first responders at the hospital? I imagine you have some at the hospital and they're in and out, but talk about like the workplace safety environment with law enforcement or first responders that are involved. I mean, do you have like a regular cadence just like you do with IT and InfoSec, or walk me through kind of that communication?
Absolutely. I mean, we have to have open communications. I mean, we have large monthly meetings going on with the police officers or the command staff. We're meeting with them. When we have challenges in real time with the officers, we have an escalation path to get a hold of PD. You're talking about two worlds that are similar but vastly different, right? So, everyone in the security world, we're walking that fine line of a physical security guy who doesn't really have arrest authority. We don't have powers in that area, but we're asked to intervene in physical encounters, right? And we have these threats, we have these real-time situations. And then we're connecting with a police officer partner that, you've seen all the regulatory stuff coming through with them, where now in Colorado, they could be held liable if they use excessive force, and they could be sued civilly, personally, not necessarily the department, right? So you see kind of attrition happening in the ranks of law enforcement where they're short staffed. So bridging that gap and educating them that when we're making a phone call, this isn't just Johnny down the block who saw a suspicious person, we're dealing with some of these serious issues and sometimes some significant threats to our facility. We need law enforcement now, right? Multiple times we have a lot of people show up to the hospital out of fear for a shooting of a loved one, right? And so we have to get that protection of our hospital, maintain our operations, but maintain the sanctity and safety of the hospital. So we're always engaging with them, talking scenarios, talking about what their challenges are. And then the day-to-day stuff where nursing and law enforcement don't speak the same language, and that Privacy Information Act, and the HIPAA and the PHI information, and we're butting heads.
I was going to ask about that too, about HIPAA,
right.
man. How are you dealing with the privacy stuff? I would imagine
there's exceptions to what we can release and what we can't. We have a process for it. We have policies on it. But getting the law enforcement to understand the workflows for it and why it exists, and getting nurses to understand what they can release, right? Because too often it's like, we can't release that. I was like, well, actually, if you look at our policy, this, and this, right? So we act really as a bridge between the two to make sure there's that good cohesion communication going on. And at the end of the day, we rely on each other, right? If law enforcement injured, they're coming to our facilities and we're getting them back on their feet, right? And if a threat happens to our facility, it's law enforcement that's keeping us safe. So we really need that close communication. And so we have a regular cadence throughout the state. Like I said, we have 14 different hospitals, we have a number of different clinics. We're always connecting law enforcement in those jurisdictions, which is a full-time job. So it's really relying on the managers of the site to take initiative of that and educate what our policies and procedures are. Something as simple as securing the campus, right? Locking your facility down. They use different terminology than we do. They have a standard business protocol that if there's a threat nearby, they're telling the facility just to lock the doors, right? You see it with schools all the time. A supermarket gets robbed and, the schools go on lockdown. Well, they talk to our healthcare thing. Like, you need to secure your doors and you need to secure your campus. And we're like, well, where's the threat, right? We have to see people in the emergency room. We can't just turn people away. We're not a business that can just shutter our doors and say, hey, we're done for today, right? Like there's definitely a unique atmosphere with healthcare. So then it's partnering with the law enforcement to realize, like, if the threat's 8 miles away, we're not gonna lock our doors, right? And if you have the person contained, then where the threat is. We don't need to lock our doors. So getting them to understand the uniqueness of our industry and the fact that we can't just shut her up like a normal business does, and getting them to speak the same language. That's really what we do, right? Understanding our challenges with trespassers and people refusing to leave, and then some of the more aggressive stuff that we see where there's staff assaults, we need to press charges, right? There's the act that allows it to be a felony for a healthcare worker to be assaulted, kind of working through that terminology when we get pushback and pressing charges. And we really have some really great community partners with law enforcement, and we just work to maintain that. It's vital to our process.
No, I love that. A common cadence is healthy. You should have a common vocabulary and be able to communicate that with, first responders and local law enforcement. Because, I'll point to Joe again, Joe, the VP of security for MGM. He said, look, if you don't know who your law enforcement contacts are, then you've already failed when it comes to security, so you better know who those people are, and you better have a relationship with those people. But Adam, we got our first question, man. I'm gonna pin it here in the chat if I can. What's the number one issue you're facing in your industry right now? I know we hinted at this in the beginning of the discussion, but number one issue, man, that you're facing, particularly at UC Health or 2025, walk us through that.
Workplace violence, hands down. Again, it's the high amount of assaults that we're seeing. As we see increase in behavioral health, we see all these other factors contributing to it. We see shorter tempers from COVID, right? Like it just seems there's shorter fuses on people. So we see a lot of violence in healthcare. It's always been there. We see nurses being verbally abused, sexually abused, physically assaulted, things that really kind of break your heart to see. Some people it's intentional. Some people, they don't know what they're doing. It's just a nature of their condition. But combating that and bringing awareness to it and addressing that is probably the hardest challenge that you have. As you talk about, third shift nursing, where staffing's down and they're going into a patient's room, right, late at night, patient's confused, they take a swing, they hit the nurse, right? Or whether it's more aggression, right? It's a father of a child who's escalating the care and the situation and interfering with care, and we have to escort them out, and they assault the staff, right? It's a robust problem with no clear direction. I mean, we do a lot of education around it. We have a lot of things we put in place for it: staff education, de-escalation training, empowering them to walk away from a situation, not feeling they have to power through it. There's a lot of initiatives we have around that. But as you can imagine, at our organization, we see the equivalent of a sports arena in a day for patients, right? So if you think of 22 to 23,000 patients a day, it's a lot of people coming through your doors,
Yeah.
right? And then so you got the workplace violence and everything that goes with it. We have more traffic in some small cities do. So how do you prevent your staff from getting assaulted and address that? And like you said, keep them feeling safe so they don't walk out the door and go somewhere else where they feel safer.
Well, it's a tall task for someone in your position, man. That's why I talk about this shared responsibility a lot. When you have that amount of people coming in, and you don't know what these people are going through, like they got out a bad day and they just want to, cause harm, or you're right, domestic violence situation, or you have a lost kid, or what have you, man. There's a lot of complexity I'm finding, and there's probably some synergy, man, between casinos and hospital that I'm now learning because, again, I'll point to this again: 24/7 operations. That's number one challenge. Number two, you guys can be open and vulnerable at times. I know casinos are a lot more open floor concepts, but a back door is left open by a nurse or a corridor or what have you. I'm sure that would expose a risk. So there's a lot of challenges, man. I think that are happening. I do want to point. We have another question here, Adam, if you don't mind, man. We actually asked this question earlier, man. I'm gonna bring it up in the chat. Again, man, do you have a favorite solution or technology that you have seen or deployed recently? You don't have to give a name, brother, but let's address this real quick.
I gotta be honest. I don't think there's any one solution that is my favorite. Again, it's the holistic approach. It's the septet. It's the concentric layers of fence that we're all familiar with. We put visitor management in place. I think that's a huge tool to know who's coming through your doors, right? Making sure that you're IDing everybody, that if you do have someone that's at risk, right away at the front entry point, you're being alerted that, hey, this person doesn't belong here. I think that is very powerful to have in place, but you have to couple it with access control on cameras, right? Like, so my favorite solution, that's a tough one. I think there's a lot of fancy bells and whistles, but I just fall back on, excuse me, access control, cameras, and visitor management, man. It's the trio that'll get you more than anywhere. It's all great to have facial recognition. It's all great to have all these analytics, but the core basis, those are my favorite. Like they have to be there. And if you don't have them, you're in trouble. Couple that with the threat assessment software and making sure you have a good background tool, because we're not law enforcement. We can't just go on the criminal database, but having that connection with the background situations, investigations, just to get a quick background on someone. Open investigations, right? All that stuff's great. People are smart enough to leave all their stuff unlocked. You get all kinds of good goodies. But I can't say I have one favorite. I think it's just a trifecta of things that, those top three, and then adding all the other ones to assess the threat. So I wish I had a cool widget that I used that I could like, this is the thing, guys, go to it. But I really just rely on the layered defense.
Well, it's always like, I'm sure you always have like something new that comes out. People see something sexy at a show. They're like, oh, I got to put this in. This is the hottest thing right now. Then after 6 months, you get tired of it and something else comes out. And like, oh, it's the hottest thing. But you're right, man. It takes an ecosystem approach. And I hate that word ecosystem. I also hate the word disruption, man, because any manufacturer that claims that we're going to disrupt the industry, it's just like, dude, go pound sand. So
right.
I think you're right. It takes open systems. It takes best in breed systems. You can't rely on just one to solve all your problems. I 100% agree there. So my next question, and again, I want to, anyone that has a question, please drop it. And we've got a couple good questions that came in, so I want to keep highlighting those. We still have about 15 minutes left here with Adam. He's been so kind enough to spend some time with me today. But Adam, my next question, brother, pretty generic. It's more of a leadership question in your position. What do you think has been like the most significant impact or achievement in your role so far at UC Health that you're really proud of that you've been able to do for the hospital?
I think probably the biggest win that we have, man, there's a lot. It's hard to look back at your time and say what's the crowning achievement. But we converted a lot of contract security managers to in-house. We hired 11 security managers. So getting the funding and the approval to do that, to take the risk to bring an internal resource into a place that's been typically outsourced. I think that's a huge win because now I have a team that I can develop and share the load to. And honestly, when you engage with those people and you see the light come on in their eyes and the understanding, and I had one of my leaders come to me and say, for the first time, I see a path and a career in security that I never saw before, and getting that feedback that okay, our leadership's making a difference, right? And the mentoring that we get to put in place and having that. So I would say that's probably what I'm most proud of is we brought those resources in house. I think, frankly, it's going to have the largest impact on the organization. Because now we have someone locally day-to-day at the hospital making those decisions and that day-to-day oversight. versus a director who's got 14 hospitals, that there's no way we can drill down to the level that we need to drill down. I think we all know the scope and scale of things, right? But now I have this team that we can drill down and we can engage with the leaders every day, support those nurses to make sure that they're not running out the door feeling scared, because we have that true follow-up, and it's in-depth, knowledgeable follow-up. So that's probably been the best achievement that we've had in my 4 years in this organization.
Man, who knew Packers were actually nice people, man? I didn't know you guys were pretty nice. No, I'm just kidding. We can
just share our cheese, right?
Yeah, we can both shit on Philly fans if you want. I could talk an hour about bad Philly fans, even though they won the Super Bowl last year. Oh man. We have another question, Adam, that came in, but before I pull up that question for you, brother, I do want to mention your point there about communication and furthering someone's career, whether it's in healthcare or security or just in general. You're right, man. There was a gentleman, Josh Anderson. You probably don't know him, but he's the director of surveillance for the Hard Rock Casino in Tulsa, which is owned by Cherokee Nation Tribal Casino. And Josh, I give shout outs to Josh a lot, because what he does well, he's got 10 casinos or 11 casinos in the tribe. And if you go to any of those casinos, every single person, whether in security or surveillance, knows Josh. And so that tells me what a really good leader does, because you're going outside your responsibility. It could be frontline staff. It could be janitors, janitorial staff, cleaning staff. They all know Josh because Josh is taking time to get to know those individuals and, build that kind of culture that everyone's talking about. So I do appreciate you saying that, because that really creates value, and it also helps with attrition and keeping employees, right?
Yeah. And, before we get to the next question, there is one software that I deployed recently that I like.
Here we go.
It's one of my biggest successes.
All right, go ahead.
But probably one of my biggest headaches too is I went with a security assessment software that really, I brought it from my last job. We trialed it here. It really puts a professional report together. But you just, again, knowing your technology and the shortfalls, checking the references and making sure you understand the references and making sure that you put a detailed report together. But man, when you do a security assessment of your site, the seamlessness, it's an online program. You take a photo, it loads it into the assessment. It's got drop down generic, like, hey, access control, inefficient access control, here's my solution. And it really makes an efficient access report or a security report. That's probably one of my favorite technologies, I'd say, because it allows me to capture 14 hospitals a lot quicker. We all know the old school approach of I'm typing a report, I'm dropping the photos in, and I got to make sure it's perfect. And it's like back being in college, making sure you reference all your sources and stuff. This has an auto-generated thing, but I learned a lesson: double check your sources, make sure that they're still valid, because resources change links over time, and making sure that they're still up to date. But man, that reporting system, once you build it out and you learn how to use it, we're still in the infant stages of doing it. We've only had it for one deployment here. I'm training my managers on it. It really makes it efficient to consolidate for executives on and what your vulnerabilities to your organization is. So not really keeping people out. It's more of assessing your program for everybody. But that is one of my good technologies.
I love the easy button when it comes to technology, man. It makes it seamless and user friendly, right? That's got to be one of the important factors. This question just came in from Cam, Adam. His question is, how is UCH combating parking lot safety or patient visitor safety before they enter your facilities?
Yeah, I give a shout out to Cameron. I know him personally, so you should know.
You did.
He's a good guy. Yeah, we have a layered approach, just like anything, between having people present on the parking lots, having cameras, having mobile cameras deployed. Again, partnering with police department and LPR deployment before they even get into it to get those alert for threats. This is the one area I think analytics is really good at. Despite the limitations, when you put a bolo on a license plate and you have a good camera to capture the license plates, I think that's integral. So I think if you're looking at an in-depth approach to security, you want to know when that bad actor is on your site before they get in there. So again, 14 different facilities. It's not standardized yet. We're working on that. Each hospital has their own budget that we roll things out. But some of our campuses, we've integrated those license plate recognition cameras. And that way we can put our at-risk people, say, hey, we know this person's spouse or this patient's coming in on their problem. We have a license plate recognition on it. We get alerted the minute they come in our lot, so our security can be aware and responding before they come in the facility. So I think that is one of the best ways for parking lot safety. The challenge I have and the caution I have for people is this is where all those analytics from the cameras come into place. Everyone's telling you how great their analytics are. But the truth is, we have huge parking lots. And we have patients being dropped off. We have people waiting in their car for patients. We have people who are nefariously cutting off catalytic converters in their parking lots. So how do you tell a vehicle that's stopped for 20 seconds waiting for a parking spot, or someone who's parked in the car for 2 hours waiting for a patient, versus someone who's up to nefarious deeds, right? So understanding what your analytics are, and let's be honest, how many people have true detailed cameras on every inch of their parking lot, right? You typically have overview cameras and have your entryways covered, right? So that's where I caution the analytics, is people are going to say, we'll detect people breaking into cars. Are you? Like, how do you tell someone going to the car and locking the door versus someone breaking the window, right? It's very hard at that stage. But I think having that, you have to layer it with personnel doing proactive patrols, have that technology with the license plate recognition readers, you know, and then having the cameras for good forensic review of it.
Don't get me started, man, on behavioral analytics. I think that's the biggest comedy hour I've ever seen. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I can tell whether or not you're pissed off, or you're angry, or happy. It's like, well, maybe I just have a resting bitch face half the time, you
Right.
know. So,
That's why
um,
we had a drone technology reach out to us, and I think drones are cool. Like, don't get me
yeah,
wrong, I think they're sweet tech.
they're cool.
I would love to have the use for it. And they're like, we're going to detect things in your parking lot, and you won't need a security officer driving around again. I was like, well, for the exact things I just mentioned, like, I think it's cool. I think if I need aerial surveillance right away because I have someone running like the cops do, and I can track them through the parking lot, that's great. But analytic wise, you know, if you're running off analytics, it doesn't do anything for me because there's too much activity in my parking lot on any given day to really do that. But man, it's a sexy technology and I'd love to use it, but it's a hard sell to the leadership when there's no impact on it, right?
Well, that points to my next question, Adam. When you talk about sexy technology and emerging technology, whether it's applicable or not, the cost is always a conversation when you have to go make a pitch into the executive. So maybe for the manufacturers and people listening, walk me through kind of like budget approvals and how do you get things approved? Are you working with other departments to maybe get a conceptualized shared budget together? Or are you working with XYZ people? So walk me through kind of how the decision-making process works for you guys when it comes to security or surveillance upgrades.
Yeah, a lot of it's just that simple, you know, return on investment. Am I able to save money elsewhere if I spend money on this technology? Meaning, do I need, you know, 30 people walking the campus if I have all these cameras? Can I cut it down to 15 because now I have cameras looking at things, right? Is there video patrols? Show me how I'm going to benefit from it and how I'm going to be able to cut costs in the long run, not just spend more on the technology, right? Is it, what's the difference between me owning it or paying you security as a service, right? Like, that's the new model. Hey, you just pay for our software. You'll pay $5,000 a year. Okay, well, what am I getting for that? How much if I just buy this outright? Do I need that service, right? And just kind of understanding that, right? Mobile camera towers. Okay, I can pay $2,500 a month to rent one, or I can buy one for $23,000. I'm just throwing numbers out, right? Well, okay, after 10 months, I might as well just bought the damn thing because I just spent more than it's worth renting it for 10 months. So those are kind of things that I look at. And if I'm going to take this to my boss, I'm going to put my name behind it, right? And I better not look stupid when rubber meets the road, right? And then what's the true scope? Like, they might have all these sexy things that are added on into it, saying that, you know, that's a term we're using today. You know, I think a
Sexy's the
panic
title
alarm
of the
filter,
interview.
It sounds like a wedding.
they'll say, hey, you know, we have panic alarm hardware. You can have wearables and you can have this, and it's going to prompt you for all this information. Okay, well, what's the need of it, right? So the wearables cost millions of dollars to roll out, right? So I'm probably not going to do that because I have, you know, 34,000 employees and 40 with vendors, it's 43,000 people, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably out the window. But then we start looking at, okay, but we have all these other features. Yeah, but I'm only going to use like 2 of them. So it's great that you have all that, but tell me why I should invest in that technology, right? So like you said, what's your weakness? And what I love to do at trade shows is, if you notice, all the vendors that are similar technology are kind of around each other. Like, I'm going to, great, you know, your X, Y, and Z technology doing metal detection. I'm going to go talk to a guy right there who's got 6 metal detectors up. Why are you better than him? Okay, well, I'm going to go talk to them quick. I'll be back, right? And shop around, right? Like, the first technology you see isn't always the best one. But if you're selling me, you better be able to display why that extra cost is going to be beneficial to me, what my return on investment is, or where's my savings from deploying the technology, right? I'm going to use this just because it's a hot topic, right? All these AI metal detectors, walk-through metal detectors. What are you saving me for money, right? So you want me to pay for a technology, let's say it's 4-year investment for $150,000, right? Okay, that's great. I can buy a stand-up metal detector for, you know, $23,000. So where's my return on investment? I'm spending a lot more than that. Well, I don't need all the officers that I need. Okay, but I still need to man it, and I still need to have response officers. So how many do I need, right? Industry standard says 2 to 3, right? So how many do I need to man that? Where's my savings? Am I reducing staff, or can I not really do that because I have a high volume of people coming through my doors, right? So it's just thinking critically like that. And if you're going to sell me, make sure that you speak my numbers and know that I'm going to challenge you on it, like it's my executives challenging me on the budget.
Well, no, this is good because I want executives and manufacturers to listen to how you kind of operate. And you're exactly right, Adam. When you go to a trade show and you see like whether it's weapon detection scanners or metal detectors, and then you see those trailer companies with everyone's got a trailer, there is nothing different on trailers. Let me just tell you this, and I'm going to piss off some people when I say this. A mobile surveillance unit or a mobile surveillance trailer, I don't care if it's got all the lighting combinations on it, the bells and the whistles, the cameras, the strobes, the audio device, they all have different flavors of how that's set up. There's only one difference between trailer companies. It's not the aesthetics, it's not how it looks, it's how involved that company of the trailer is involved with local law enforcement. Because I guarantee if you put a trailer on your job site and there's someone that's not so, or at your hospital and someone's breaking into a car and maybe that person monitoring the trailer calls law enforcement, if that law enforcement person does not know who that trailer company is, like what's the odds of that person actually responding? Now, I'm not saying they won't respond to the incident, but I always like make this argument, man. It's like the trailer companies that work very, very well with law enforcement are the more successful versus the ones that don't work well with law enforcement, because half the time when calls happen, whether it's deterrence or it's crime or it's break-ins, if the law enforcement agency receives a call from that trailer company, they already have familiarity with how the technology works. So I think that's the question too, that you should look at these trailer companies, because you're right, man. There's probably 20 or 30 of these guys at ISC West a couple weeks ago in Vegas. They were just everywhere, man.
Right.
But
And
there's
they'll all say, "Hey, we got this horn that's going to go off and challenge the people." Well, okay, does that make sense for your parking lot, right? So if you think of a casino or you think of a healthcare thing, this little old lady's coming in to spend their money or get healthcare, and all of a sudden this thing says, "Hey, don't trespass here," and they have a heart attack in the parking lot, right? Like, is that appropriate for your business? It makes sense in a remote parking lot, like at an airport or something, but in a business where there's a lot of people coming and going, those horns and strobes might not be the best deployment. So, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I think it's applicable, kind of where it depends on where you deploy the technology. Obviously, I think trailers and stuff, and trailers, I guess trailers in particular, I like to see a lot of trailers at construction sites, just because copper and steel and lumber tends to walk off on job sites, and sometimes they're viewed as deterrents. I know retailers put trailers in parking lots, and sometimes people perceive that as like a safety thing, or some other people, they're like, oh, is this shopping center safe? They have a trailer in the parking lot. Do I want to shop here, or do they have a problem with shoplifters, right? So that's perception thing too. You have to kind of balance, with your security setup. I do have another question here, and I know we're wrapping at the end of the hour, so I'll probably 5 more minutes out of your time, man. This question just came in. Which vertical does security fall under there at UC? Do you want to answer that real quick?
Yeah, I'm assuming that's reporting structure. We report to the COO of the system, so we're one removed from the CEO. So we have a pretty direct reporting structure straight to where we need to. I know there's a lot of people that report to facilities and things of that nature, but we have a good reporting structure. My boss, the CSO, reports directly to the COO for the company. So.
Is that typical in healthcare? Like the security reports the operations, or how does it work?
It's a challenge. Sometimes it's facilities, right? And
Okay.
there's a challenge. Obviously, I think we all know from the security industry that there's a challenge with that. I've seen it in other organizations. They report to legal, right? But operationally, it makes sense to report to a COO or the CEO directly. So I think it's a pretty good reporting structure, because we need to look at operations across the system. We need to be able to speak to someone who understands our lingo, right? Not have it filtered down. My biggest aggravation is you try to talk security and someone tries to insert themselves and interpret what you're saying. And you're like, you're not hitting the points we need to hit, right? So I think it's a good reporting structure. I think it really works well. I know my boss really kind of keeps those relationships alive at that level. So it's a good reporting structure for us.
Well, hopefully your boss sees this and gives you a raise for speaking so intelligent on this live interview, man. But yeah, it's funny, man. I think professional sports, I got a few friends that are in the NFL and NBA, and some of them report to facility operations or COO. So I see some synergy on that side as well. Adam, we're at the top of the hour, my friend. But are there anything recommendations or advice that you want to give to people listening in before we wrap up here?
Man, I say it every time I talk publicly is just invest in yourself, right? Take the time to understand your craft, understand your job, be able to speak knowledge at it. You're always going to make mistakes. You're always going to fail. It's just getting back up and keeping at it, right? Learning from those mistakes and getting better. So
I love it, man. And if people want to get more involved with you or contact you, I'm not going to blast like cell phone or email or anything, but what's the best way to connect with you? Is it LinkedIn, I would imagine?
LinkedIn works, right? There may be a few delay. I'm not on it every day. I'm not a junkie for social media. It's the only social media I have. So it's really super easy. It's the Adam Smith on LinkedIn. So
There we go, man. Well, Adam, genuinely appreciate the time, brother. Really appreciate you hanging out with me for this last hour.
yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, guys and girls, that was Adam Smith, Director of Security Operations for UC Health. If you're not connected with Adam, please connect with him on LinkedIn. If you do like our live interviews, make sure you subscribe to SVIP. My QR code is on the top right. I do want to give a shout out to my sponsor, Swear, for sponsoring this live interview. And make sure to tune in for our next interview next week. It's coming at you Wednesday next week. Another healthcare professional that we're going to be sitting down with. His name is Brian. He is the VP at Summit Health up there in the Northeast. So make sure you guys tune in on that. And you guys stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in.